Welcome to Ask the Mayor, presented by Speaking of Timmins. Brought to you today by Vanelli's Pizza in the Timmins Square and by Kamoskosia Snow Resort. It is my pleasure to welcome Mayor Steve Black for our exclusive end-of-year interview. Mayor Black, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, and yourself?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Now that you've had a whole 22 days to settle in as a mayor, I thought we'd start with a couple of issues that have proven popular and controversial in the community over the past couple of weeks. The first question obviously touches on the ongoing investigation by the Ontario Civilian Police Commission into discreditable conduct charges against Timmins Police Chief John Goetze. Can you clarify what role, if any, the city can play in addressing the situation and what the next steps are from a City of Timmins perspective?
Well, I guess I can start with the next steps. I mean, I think it's been clear that the hearing's in March, and I think from a city's perspective, we'll wait till the results of the hearing are complete before we get into any formal statements. I think the details of what's going on has been laid out in the Timmins Times, and that's fair enough as per what was said at the hearing, and that's about all I'll comment on it until the matter is resolved, other than to say that the chief still has the full support of the board and myself as mayor of Timmins in continuing to carry out his duties with respect to whether this hearing is ongoing or not.
Another issue relating to the Timmins Police Services that has surfaced over the past week or so is the fact that the TPS board is considering providing each officer with a taser gun as part of their regular equipment. Can you provide us with some comments on that particular development?
Well, we had a preliminary discussion at our first board meeting, and the issue will come back probably to our January board meeting as we get into budget discussions and get the policy confirmed on the use of the tasers. But the main point here is that the ministry has now expanded the use of them to the frontline officers in their guidelines, and for us as a police service, it's important to equip our police officers with all the non-lethal options they have, so that really using their handgun is a last resort. And there's been a number of police associations across the province that have moved this way, and a number of them that are now moving it with the ministry's direction. So I think the big picture is we'd have to look at ourselves if an officer ever had to draw and use his gun and he wasn't equipped with the equipment that's laid out per the ministry guidelines and recommendations.
Obviously, one of the early priorities for the new council is to work on the 2015 municipal budget. Council has traditionally hosted public meetings and has allowed different community groups, such as the Chamber of Commerce, to make budget presentations and recommendations. However, there's now a group in Timmins called the Timmins Taxpayers Association, as I know you're aware, that is lobbying to have direct input into budget deliberations. Do you anticipate allowing groups such as the TTA to have direct involvement and input into the budget deliberations in the number crunching, if you will, or are you more likely to invite the TTA to make budget recommendations at a public meeting for consideration, such as you do with the Chamber of Commerce and other groups?
Well, I think they'll have the same opportunity that any member of the public has to come forward and make a deputation or presentation during the budget discussions with their feedback and what they feel is the important direction for the City of Timmins to consider when we're in our budget deliberations. But at the end of the day, it is the City of Timmins budget, and it's the elected members of council's job to represent the taxpayers and do what they feel is in the best interest of the city moving forward. So we will take the opportunity to hear from any groups that want to come forward and speak on behalf of residents or groups of residents and take those into considerations as we make our decisions going forward.
Now, on another front, the recent decision by Resolute Forest Products to close their mill in Iroquois Falls has highlighted the influence that environmental groups such as Greenpeace and many others, mostly based Southern Ontario, have on business in Northern Ontario. You've invited Premier Wynne to Timmins to meet with Northern Ontario leaders to discuss this issue. What would be some of the key items and concerns that you'd like to discuss and highlight for Premier Wynne during such a meeting?
Well, I think the Premier has a unique viewpoint from Northern Ontario with having family who's been in the area for a number of years, up to recent years. So I'm hoping that she appreciates what Northern Ontario has to offer and also what keeps us going. And unfortunately, regardless of parties, it doesn't really matter when you're dealing with politicians down south. They don't totally grasp what's going on in Northern Ontario or really understand the issues that we deal with up here. And a lot of these policies and decisions are being made by Southern Ontario politicians without really the consultation with the municipalities and the municipal leaders to see what the impact is in our backyard and our residents up here. So I'm hoping she'll come up and meet with a number of us. I want to meet with her just to discuss bigger Timmins issues, because Resolute was definitely a devastating issue that came up to start off the term for Iroquois Falls, and will have its impact around the region on all the municipalities in our region, as the forestry and industry is very connected throughout the region and the different types of mills. But I want to talk with her the bigger picture as we get ready for the next decade, and some of our long outstanding large employers start to wind down a bit too, because we're going to have to be prepared and set up with our economy to handle the transition phase that we're going to go through in the next decade.
Has there been any movement on that front? Have you are you in the process of trying to plan such a meeting, or are we still kind of waiting for everything to settle and then go from there?
We have heard back from her office, so we are very optimistic that we'll have a meeting with her, either hopefully here in Timmins is what we're hoping for, but we're optimistic that we'll have a meeting fairly early in the new year and have her either up to Timmins or we'll head down to Toronto. But as I said, it's always better to get the politicians up here in Northern Ontario so they can see a bit of what's going on and see the good things that have been going on in our city and how it's been growing with the hotels and Autumnwood and Extendicare, and get a chance to show them around and see what's been going on, as well as some of the challenges and issues that we face, and they can discuss them here in our backyard.
So the Iroquois Falls Mills closure and the impact it will have on that community have some people viewing it as somewhat of a foreshadowing to the type of impact, the closure of Glencore, as an example, will have in a few years. Can you share what the City of Timmins is doing to prepare for that eventuality outside of the economic diversification efforts already being worked on by the TEDC?
Well, I think that's a big focus that our council needs to take, and that's why I've been trying to reiterate that we need to think longer term and look at the bigger picture rather than make decisions based on this year or the circumstances in Timmins this year alone, because we are going to go through a major transition in the next probably 5 to 10 years here, with both Glencore winding down, and when you look at the Hollinger pit, it's got a 5 to 10 year mine life in it as well. So it's you're going to see some substantial changes in our community in the near future, and I think it's important for council to start looking at those decisions, and we're really going to have to look at what we're spending and where we're spending it to determine how we're going to continue to try and keep taxes in check when we lose some of this major assessment. When you're talking Glencore, you're talking in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million worth of assessment that we'll lose. So we really need to look at our core services that we provide and see what we need to continue to provide, and maybe what areas that we're spending money that perhaps isn't a core service of the municipal government and can be offered by another service provider.
It's been almost 2 months now since you were elected Mayor of Timmins. Can you share some of the things that have surprised you, both in the build-up to your swearing in and once you were sworn in with the rest of the new council?
Well, I don't know that there's any major surprises. Obviously, it was nice to hear from politicians across the provinces and at all levels after the election, and former mayors as well. So the level of support from past and present politicians has been very, I guess, encouraging, and maybe a little surprising to have some of them reach out. But it's been a pleasure, and getting to meet our new council and kind of get the orientation processes started has been an integral part of getting us set up to move forward, but nothing overly surprising yet. Obviously, we have a number of challenges, and it hasn't been a secret discussed throughout the campaign how our infrastructure challenges are going to be a major issue the city needs to face when it comes to roads and bridges and items like that. And I think that's what's going to pose the biggest challenge for this council moving forward, is how to tackle some of those capital projects that we're going to need to do while trying to keep taxes in check and not place the burden solely on our residential taxpayers. So we're going to have to work well with all levels of government and really reiterate that the infrastructure spending that they put out even recently. Yeah, it's nice to have a 3-year dedicated infrastructure fund, which is something we've been lobbying for as municipal governments, is to have that dedicated infrastructure fund. But when you look at it being $195,000 a year, and the money that we're talking on the connecting link alone is upwards of $50 to $80 million of repairs that are needed there, that used to be 90% funded by the province. Obviously, the $195,000 is a long ways away from just where we used to be from their involvement just a couple of years ago before they removed the connecting link funding. So we have a lot of work as council, and I have a lot of work as mayor to try and work with both levels of government and let them know what our challenges are up here in Northern Ontario and have our voices heard.
Of course, being mayor involves more than local issues. Can you share some of the regional issues that you are hoping to help address with Queen's Park?
Well, I think it's important for the municipal leaders up here to appreciate and give credit to the Liberals. They have a majority government, and they're going to decide what direction the province heads in. So quite often we've been critical of policies and will likely continue to be critical of policies they have, but I think we have to approach it from a different angle of, listen, you're the government, we're going to work with you. We understand that's the direction you want to head when it comes to policy development, and all we want is to have our chance to have some input in these policies and raise our concerns from a social and economic standpoint and have you take those into consideration. I went down and met with Minister Morrow last week to discuss some of the forestry issues, and we got into issues like the Far North Act and the Green Energy Act and all these policy developments that they've put in place that are kind of hindering our natural resource industries up here in Northern Ontario. And, you know, when you look at the Fraser Institute study on mining, and a decade ago, just over a decade ago, Ontario used to be the #1 jurisdiction for mining in the world. It used to be the envy of the entire mining world, and now we fall into number 28. So at some point, the government has to sit back and say, you know what, there is some validity to this. There's still lots of minerals and resources in Ontario. It's not that we're running out of resources. It's some other factors that have changed. And so I kind of told them, I said, you know, we're not opposed to green energy. We like green energy. It's a good cause, but at the same time, the subsidies that are contained within the Green Energy Act have been driving up our hydro prices, and that's had quite a detrimental effect on our Northern Ontario industry. So if you're going to implement these policies, you have to continue to have long-term policies for our industrial partners up here so that they can continue to operate in a competitive environment and we don't keep losing jobs to Quebec.
So 2015 is already shaping up to be an interesting year, both in Timmins and throughout Northern Ontario. Can you provide some of the things that you would like to see happen, or what you're hoping to see happen during the first year of your term as mayor?
Well, I think obviously as we get into this budget, a couple of things that I believe we need to continue to focus on is some of the quality of life aspects that we've had here, and a couple of the items that I campaigned were the beautification of our corridor, and I think that's an important step to take, and some focus on our major parks like Hollinger Park. I'd like to see some upgrades there as we look to scale back spending in a few areas. I think we have to keep investing in our community so that the generations coming up still see a value and growth in the community in the areas that attract residents. I met with a group of university and college students who were back in town over the holidays today for coffee with the mayor, and you know, those are the type of things we discussed. Is their big concern is jobs. Number one, they want to make sure that they have jobs back here to come home to, and then just what does the community have to offer them, and those are the types of things that we need to remember if we're going to continue to grow as a community and not progress backwards. We need to still be willing to invest in the quality of life here in Timmins.
And finally, Mayor Black, if you want to take a few moments to address our viewers heading into 2015 and to what is hopefully going to be an exciting and productive year for the city of Timmins.
Well, I think I'll just take the opportunity on behalf of all of Mayor and Council and the staff at the City of Timmins just to say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone. I think we encourage everyone to enjoy the holidays and spend the time with family and friends, but also be safe and make sure you're not drinking and driving. There's enough options out there to get home safely at the end of the night, and just enjoy the holidays and Happy New Year.
Thank you for joining us for Ask the Mayor, presented by Speaking of Timmins, brought to you today by Vanilli's Pizza in the Timmins Square and by Kamoskosia Snow Resort.